Delta Force launched into open beta on December 4th to mixed reviews. But why? Some say the game feels super fun and a lot like Battlefield, but others are saying it might install spyware? Well, that's a big claim. Let's come back to that later, but first let's talk about what it's like to play the game. When you start Delta Force for the first time, you need to set up a League Pass account. If you're wondering what that is, so was I. It's a level infinite pass, a third-party account system that games like Arena Breakout Infinite and Exoborn use. As it turns out, I already had an account but didn't know it. An error message flashed on the screen for just a second and then disappeared without me noticing, so I was still waiting for an authentication code that never showed up. Only after trying it again did I notice the error telling me I already had an account, and after spending 6 minutes on figuring this out and resetting my password, I finally logged in. But even now I see a weird login failed message when I start the game, so I'm not really sure what's up with that. Once the game launched, I stared at a screenshot and a loading bar for another 3 minutes while I waited for shaders to load. Then there was an intro video that took another 4 minutes. It would have been nice if the video played while the shaders were loading, at least there would have been something to watch while waiting. Luckily, you can skip the video, and if you're wondering, it's the usual story. You're not missing much. Once everything was set up, I tried logging in again to see how long it would take to get into a game. From the moment I clicked play in Steam to actually getting into a match, it took me 2 minutes and 25 seconds, clicking through the menus as fast as possible. Your experience might vary depending on your hardware, available matches, and other factors, but this should give you a decent idea of how long it takes to jump into a game solo. Inviting a friend to my squad was harder than I expected. I try to give games the benefit of the doubt, but after all these issues I ran into, I think it's fair to call this a problem. Before you can invite someone to a squad or join theirs, you need to add them as a friend. The friend interface is pretty confusing. There's a search box at the top of the screen with an add button next to it, but when you start typing your friend's name, the add button disappears. And that's because the search box is meant for finding your existing friends, not adding new ones. To add a new friend, you either have to click on the add button first, or if you've already started typing their name, use the advanced search button at the bottom of the screen. This then takes you to a different screen to complete the search. In my opinion, this all could have been done on one page. Another issue I noticed was with the friend invites themselves. Whether I sent an invite or received one, the notification just didn't appear at first. I could hear the sound of the invite, but there was no pop-up to click. I had to Google how to accept squad invites in the game just to figure out what to look for, and then out of nowhere it just started working. Once my friend accepted the invite, we were finally able to get into a game together. While struggling with the squad invites, I also tried inviting through the Steam friends list. My friend received the invite, but when they clicked play, nothing happened. The same thing also happened when they invited me. The game's objective is easy to understand. If you've played the Battlefield series, you'll recognize modes similar to Conquest and Rush. In Delta Force, they're called King of the Hill and Attack and Defend. In King of the Hill, you capture and hold points on the map. Attack and Defend has defenders trying to stop the attackers from capturing points. If the attackers succeed, the defenders fall back, and the fight moves to the next sector. Some modes are limited, like Blitz, which is King of the Hill but without base respawns, and since it wasn't available when I played, I won't be covering it in the review. Another mode is Operations, an extraction mode similar to Escape from Tarkov, DMZ in Call of Duty, or Hazard Zone in Battlefield. If you've played any extraction shooter, this one will feel familiar. Lastly, there's a campaign mode coming soon, but as of the review, it is not available. When it comes to story, there really isn't one, at least not until the campaign is released, but there's plenty to keep you busy with progression. Like other shooters, Delta Force has a battle pass, progression system for weapons, operators, vehicles, as well as multiple quests, or events as the game calls them. The game includes different challenges and quests that seem to be updated regularly. This means that along with unlocking new items as you progress, there's always a fresh challenge to tackle. Combined with the time-limited modes, there's always something to keep you engaged. Delta Force is super fun to play. The shooting is exciting, the special abilities of the characters are believable and entertaining, and the maps are well designed, creating a fun and an exhilarating experience. It really is just a free version of Battlefield and overall just feels really good. In terms of returning to the game, I'd say maybe, but I'm leaning towards yes. As I've already said, the game really feels like Battlefield, so if you're already playing Battlefield 2042, Battlefield 3 or 4, and you're still working on unlocking new gear and characters, you'll probably have more fun progressing in those games since you're already invested. But if you're tired of those games, you want something fresh, or if you just want a free-to-play game that feels like Battlefield, you're gonna love Delta Force. Most multiplayer games offer lots of replay value, whether that's due to the various maps, the loadouts you use, the opponents you're playing against, or the game mode. There's so many different options that make each match feel different. Delta Force is no exception. There were matches where our team came back after a rough start, and others where we lost the lead at the last second. In operations, you get that rush of excitement when you hear your enemies nearby, wondering who's going to win the fight. Since the game is still in open beta, I'm sure it will only get better as time goes on. A lot of people are playing Delta Force right now, which shows how excited players are for something that's not Battlefield or Call of Duty. Looking at the peak player counts, there have been anywhere from 50,000 to over 100,000 players online since launch. Those are impressive numbers, especially when compared to Battlefield 2042. During the same time period, Battlefield 2042's player count ranged between 7,000 and 17,000. Of course, many Battlefield fans are likely trying out Delta Force, and both games are available on more platforms than just Steam. Still, the difference in player numbers is hard to ignore, and it's likely due to some of the things that make this game great. Now on to some things that I appreciate about this game. One of the first things I noticed with Delta Force is the skippable intro. Too many games force you to sit through the cinematic intros that add little to no value. Most players either don't pay attention or forget about them right away, and gamers are always asking for skippable intros, and it's great to see the developers get this right. The operator's futuristic abilities and tools are both fun and practical. For example, D-Wolf has a triple blaster that fires 3 grenades, tactical movement that lets him run faster, and smoke grenades for cover. All of these abilities are incredibly useful in combat. From the few operators I've tried, it seems like their traits and gadgets are consistently well thought out. The gunplay in Delta Force felt fantastic. You don't need to spend hours figuring out mechanics like bullet drop or worrying about complex weapon handling. Even with the sniper rifle, I only needed a minute or two to get the hang of it, and I was effective on the battlefield right away. Delta Force manages to feel both familiar and unique. It shares some resemblance with Battlefield in design and gameplay, but stands apart far enough to feel like its own experience. That balance of familiarity makes it easy to jump in without having to completely learn a new playstyle, while the differences add a fresh layer of excitement. Lastly, teams in Delta Force seem to be much better at supporting each other than in Battlefield. Sure, you still have moments where a teammate runs past you while you're down, but overall the level of support was impressive. I was genuinely surprised by how often I was revived. On top of that, players frequently dropped ammo and heals in critical areas, making it easier to hold key positions and fend off enemy pushes. It really felt like teammates understood the objective and worked together to win. Even though Delta Force has a lot of things that make it a good game, we can't overlook some of the negatives. I'm not a fan of games using unnecessary launchers, especially when they're launched through another platform. Unfortunately, the Delta Force launcher comes with its own set of issues. For instance, every time I click play in Steam, I get a login failed error. While I eventually get into the game, it's an annoyance. On top of that, closing the game doesn't close the launcher. It lingers in the system tray, making it appear as though you're playing for hours when you're not. The user interface and experience are mostly manageable, but some design choices are baffling. I've already touched on the convoluted friend adding process, but there's another issue: the reward collection system. Collecting rewards involves navigating to multiple screens similar to a mobile game. Why not just consolidate everything into one interface? This isn't just my opinion, many negative reviews have been highlighting this flaw. The next issue is something that Call of Duty players will be familiar with: compiling shaders. While there's a need for this, the implementation is terrible. There are very few games on the market that take this approach of stopping you from doing pretty much anything while shaders are compiling, and it's frustrating if you have limited time to get into a game, and so you sit down to play only to realize that you have to wait for shaders to compile. Many gamers have purchased SSDs over the years to reduce load times, and now here we are stuck waiting for something else. I know that this game is only in the beta phase, and so maybe the issues I've mentioned will get better over time, but if a game company is willing to take our money for battle passes and items, then I think it's important that we hold them to a high standard. Speaking of money, let's discuss the in-game economy. Delta Force uses multiple currencies: Delta Coins, Delta Tickets, and Mandel Coins. These currencies all share the same exchange rate of 1-to-1, but that system feels unnecessarily complicated. Delta Tickets appear to be a bonus for market transactions, but the purpose of Mandel Coins remains unclear. With one Delta Coin equaling one of each of these other currencies, I'm really failing to understand the point. The pricing is also eyebrow-raising. While the Battle Pass is reasonably priced at around $10, weapon packs and bundles are a different story. One pack in the store costs 2,400 Delta Coins, or tickets, equating to at least $40, and that's the sale price. Regularly, it would cost $50. Another bundle is priced at $70 on sale, or $100 at full price. While the most shocking example, a gun listed for 130,000 Delta Coins, which equates to, let's do the math here. Yeah, that's way too much. While nobody is expected to pay that, the mere existence of such prices is absurd. Compared to other shooters where you can buy cool skins for under $20, this pricing structure feels preposterous. Yes, you don't have to buy anything, but the comparison to more consumer-friendly pricing in other games is hard to ignore. Alright, with the review out of the way, before we get to the rank, let's address the spyware elephant in the room. I'm not an expert on kernel-level anti-cheat, let's call it KLA, but here's my take as someone with 17 years of IT experience. If these negative reviewers are going by the literal definition of spyware, then sure, I guess it's spyware. But then so is social media, and every other piece of software on your machine that sends data back to a company after you accept their terms of service. Spyware implies malicious intent, which isn't the case here, and developers are transparent about the KLA. The store page explicitly mentions it, and you have to create a third-party account and accept the EULA before playing. If this anti-cheat were truly malicious, other games using it, like Arena Breakout Infinite, would have been pulled by now. Additionally, with Delta Force available on Steam and Epic Games, their vetting process would have flagged any major issues related to spyware. Lastly, no major gaming news outlets like PC Gamer, IGN, or Kotaku have reported concerns about spyware in this game. So where do all these claims come from? One possible reason is an issue that popped up during the first couple of days of release where KLA services weren't being fully removed during uninstalls. The developers have since addressed this, and I've confirmed this in my own testing. Another reason could be the bias against Tencent, the game's parent company, due to Chinese ownership and its business practices. That's all too much to get into here though. Lastly, some users might have simply joined the trend of review bombing this new release, a baffling phenomenon in itself. With the drama hopefully addressed, let's move on and rank this beast. Overall, Delta Force delivers an exciting gameplay experience that feels familiar yet unique enough to stand on its own. While the game has its share of technical issues, an inaccessible in-game economy, and a sometimes frustrating UI, it's still a solid title. It's the kind of game you can jump into with friends, enjoy whichever game mode suits your playstyle, and leave feeling satisfied, provided you steer clear of the in-game store purchases. For these reasons, Delta Force earns a 7 out of 10, placing it firmly in A tier. If you're planning to play Delta Force, I've added the links below in the description. If you enjoyed the video or agree with the B tier rating, I'd appreciate you hitting that like button. And if you disagree, or if you have an idea for a free-to-play game you'd like me to review, let me know down in the comments. Also, don't forget to click the video link on your screen, because the next game might be your new favorite.